And when we think transcendent players, we think first and foremost quarterbacks. And you're bringing in this kind of talent, and we think Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence, Kyler Murray, those kind of guys. Are any of those guys in South Florida?
Not since Geno. Well, I mean, yeah, Geno Smith, you had Bridgewater. I mean, Lamar Jackson from Boynton Beach. What
was the deal on Lamar Jackson when he came out?
Lamar Jackson, so number one, as you've seen this from all the media that they've done, his mother was intractable about the fact that he's a quarterback. Don't talk to me about no position change. Don't talk about my running back, wide receiver skill. No, my boy is a quarterback. And you get that. You've seen that in any kind of media, of any fictional story or any pretty much other story of, guys, wanting to be quarterbacks and things like that. You had the dad and everything, John Elway, with his dad, saying, no, I'm not even going to have him play for your team. He's a quarterback, but he's not, whatever, all those kind of things. So that was the number one. He was the backup plan for Miami because Miami had Dwayne Lawson committed in that class from Tampa, who ended up going to Virginia Tech. And that was the year after we had signed Brad Kaya. So this is Brad Kaya's freshman year of college. So Dwayne Lawson, who was like a high jump and triple jump champion in his classification, as well as being a very good football player, huge guy, like 6'6", 215 pounds with a huge arm, decided, look, I'm not going to go to Miami because they got this freshman. He's going to play. And so in the group of backup options was Lamar Jackson, who Pompano Beach is like right up the street from me. And then he lived there, and then he moved up and he went to Boynton Beach, which is up in West Palm, or Palm Beach County. And so Miami kicked the tires on him and everything, and a bunch of other teams did too. But Bobby Petrino had been in there from day one and was like, no, you're going to come to Louisville, you're going to be a quarterback. That's it. And so even when Miami reached out late to try to talk about it and everything, he was pretty much sold on Louisville and everything. Lamar Jackson, if you look back at the highlights and everything, he put on shows in high school. He did a lot of things that you're seeing. He didn't have the greatest talent around him at Boynton. So even some of the throws, even if you grade, it's kind of that pro football focus thing where you grade the throw appropriately, but it's dropped or it's, whatever, but, things like that. So there was a little bit of that. But he was a known guy. He just wasn't. But anyway, Lamar Jackson was a known guy, even in the local area, but he wasn't that guy. He wasn't Lamar Jackson at that point. And he wasn't even when he got to Louisville. And then they started losing games. And then they were like, okay, we're going to tweak the offense a little bit. We're going to put the young kid out there and see what he can do. And then we saw what he could do. So, yeah, he was a guy that Miami did go after, even though, again, it was as a fallback when their number one committed QB decided to go elsewhere in that class. But, yeah, basically Bobby Petrino got in there early, was all in on him being a quarterback, had a good relationship with the mother and the family because, again, like I said, she was 100% on the fact that, my baby's playing quarterback and don't talk to me about nothing else. And even ran off a couple of other teams that tried to come in and say, oh, well, maybe we thought about, seeing what – never mind, hang up the phone. Don't talk to me about that, coach. I don't want to – no, period. So, yeah, that's kind of the story on him.
Yes, that the ACC is going to release a schedule for 2020 by next Wednesday. Within the proposals that are being considered is not just playing Notre Dame, as is already scheduled, 6 teams versus Notre Dame, but expanding that to a full schedule and making Notre Dame eligible for the conference championship.
In this year.
Yes.
And it's an interesting conversation because from the report, the ACC is considering a 10-game schedule plus 1 non-conference game. And that would be to sustain the ACC, SEC traditional rivals, your Georgia, Georgia Tech, Florida, Florida State, Clemson, South Carolina, and what's the other
Louisville,
one?
Kentucky.
Louisville, Kentucky, exactly. So those 4 games that are traditionally played, trying to preserve that so you have that 1 non-conference, things like that. Notre Dame has 6 ACC opponents on the schedule. And the only way to make that work would be for them to play as an ACC team. And then they have like 3 non-conference games, but then, obviously flipping that up and seeing, things like that. So to make the math work then, and to have Notre Dame as part of this equation, then you make them a conference team for this year, make them then eligible for the ACC championship game for this year. And again, this is where John Swofford or whomever at the ACC needs to flex muscle. No, you're not going to. No. And I know, and so the ACC has more scheduling partnerships than other conferences, just because you've made this conference now is a conglomeration of teams from other conferences. Really think about, Miami, Virginia Tech, being in the Big East, Boston College as well, things like that. And you're coming over. So, you have these other considerations, and then you want to be connected to Notre Dame. So Notre Dame, the base of Notre Dame's schedule is going to be ACC teams, even though they're an independent. So you have usually 5, this year 6 times that you cross over into Notre Dame's national schedule, their independent schedule, things like that. Then you got to consider the ACC, SEC traditional matchups and things like that. So it's more than just the Big Ten saying, look, we're going conference only. That's it. Boom, done. Because of all these considerations, I still do not agree with this. Notre Dame has to choose. You cannot have your cake and eat it too, even if it's just for one season. No, absolutely not. So this is a time where I think that you need to push them to join the conferences as a full member, as they are in many sports, basketball, baseball, other Olympic sports, or buy. You know what I mean? And I know Notre Dame is a national brand. I know that they have their own, but they're insular. They're being concerned about themselves. They're being selfish. And I mean that at the root of the word. Look, if you take a day off from work, you're being selfish. Well, no, I just needed a day off. I was tired. Oh, yeah, that's fine. You're not worried about the work. You're worried about yourself. That's what selfish means. And I know it's been colloquialized to be negative. They're being selfish, but they're being selfish, I think, in the root of the word and also in the colloquialized negative way, because they're worried about their bottom line, because they're not sharing their NBC football contract money. You know what I mean? They're not sharing if they were to get the Orange Bowl slot for the ACC. They're not sharing that money. They're not kicking back in or taking a share and putting that in the pot and everything. They're keeping that money for themselves. So they're being singularly focused. So as the ACC, you got to decide, are you facilitating their individual program status and greed, or are you running the Atlantic Coast Conference? And if you're running the Atlantic Coast Conference, then they need to come over here, not the other way around. And I get that, you got to play the chess. You have to think 3 moves ahead. You have to do all that political stuff and think about all the moves that could, or the fallout that could happen. And But look, they need us more than we need them right now. And that's just a point of fact, because if the ACC were to go to conference only with 1 non-conference game, that means that Notre Dame then has to choose 1 ACC team to play. The end. And we're going to do our thing. So I don't agree with it. I don't agree with it. It's all of a win for Notre Dame. It's a low cost, high reward situation for them, and it's all loss for the ACC. What are we gaining from that? Not much, to be perfectly honest. So, again, and I've been staunchly against this. I know that I spoke about this last week. I know Mark is, at least last week was staunchly against it. I don't want to speak for him now. But yeah, it is a thing that has been considered in addition to the pods that we spoke about before, in addition to the home and home or the whatever other ACC schedule. But I mean, when you see, obviously Notre Dame, the brand is strong. It is a national university par excellence. It is a great academic institution. It is an iconic program in the world of college football. And they do have muscles to flex, but they need us to allow them to do what it is that they want to do. So they're not coming in and just, kicking the door down and taking what they want. They're asking for permission. And for me, we're only giving that permission only if you're coming in as a full-time member starting this year and continuing forward. But, the 15 university presidents and chancellors will have to vote on that proposal, vote on any schedule proposal, including the one that we're talking about today with admitting Notre Dame as a conference team for this year. And those are politicized positions, and there are political machinations to the voting process and their stances on these things. So we'll see what happens. But I am not a fan of the idea of admitting Notre Dame as a football member for the 2020 season, regardless. Call me a hater, call me whatever. Also, Brian Kelly's an aberrant, atrocious human being. Rest in peace to Declan Sullivan, who was sent up in a cherry picker in the name of practice video. And rest in peace, Lizzie Seberg, who was sexually assaulted by Notre Dame football players and driven to commit suicide. And those pieces are up on the internet forever that you can read about what happened to Declan Sullivan and to Lizzie Seberg. This is part of the reason why I hate Notre Dame. I'm never going to forget that. And if you see me on Twitter, that is the thing that I'm going to say. Brian Kelly sent Declan Sullivan to his certain death in a cherry picker in 75-mile-an-hour winds in the name of practice video. That is verifiably true. I'm not making any slanderous statement. You can look that up. I do not like Notre Dame. I do not want to let them in. And if I'm bringing in my own personal feelings to that by informing you, if you probably forgot, because it was years ago, about Declan Sullivan and or Lizzie Seberg, then, hey, that's what I was supposed to do. I urge you to go look it up, but that's part of the consideration for me, and I'm not sorry about it.